Minister, thank you very much for speaking to CNBC. I want to, at the very outset of this interview, get your reaction on Chandrayaan-3's moon landing, being a representative of the government, and what this means for India's space plans.
Well, all I can say that there is an all-round sense of elation, pure joy, and one that could be described as something even more. This is a reaffirmation of the faith in the India story. This comes at a very important juncture, whilst India is chairing the G20, when India is moving in the direction of becoming the world's third largest economy. But I think more than all that, I think it's the reaffirmation of the India story. I mean, you've got a young 18-year-old teenager, taking on the world champion for the chess grandmaster, the chess champion, 18-year-old teenager. You've got our scientists besides themselves with joy, and the entire nation, 1.4 billion people. And I think as the Prime Minister summed it up so eloquently, that this is a sense of achievement which comes through after wading through oceans of difficulties in so many different areas. It's a shot in the arm for the space program. I've been a student of this program for many years as a professional diplomat. I remember many, many years ago, 1992, when I was a joint secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs,
Sure.
We had to deal with sanctions on the ISRO's purely legitimate program. But there were misgivings, etc. And today, when India is the first country to land on the South Pole, I think not only our scientists, but I think the technology innovators throughout the world who are dealing with this fantastic area, which is the transition from science fiction to reality. Now, they're all wondering what all is in store for us after that. I already see announcement that we have built on the Chandrayaan-3's success. We're already looking at the next, mission, which is planned to be launched, low orbit, putting people out there, manned, space. So, I mean, I am just fascinated personally. You remember, I think it was 1969.
Right.
I mean, those were the guys who were also the actual people who crossed the frontier.
Sure.
Some small step for man, giant leap for mankind. I mean, that was one of the first statements made when he said that Eagle has landed.
Yeah.
But then in 1969, we looked at all this with a sense of admiration, with a sense of awe. And now you find an Indian vehicle makes a landing after many setbacks. I mean, and I think it's a sense of dedication, a sense of steely resolve in the political leadership, the Prime Minister, who in 2019, when we had a setback, and anyone else could have got disheartened, probably would have got disheartened, and may have stepped back. But here is a man who hugged the then ISRO chief, and it was not just a pro forma hug. It was one of those reassurances. Look, friend, we are with you. And from 2019 to 2023, that is what this victory of science, ISRO, and steel resolve in the political leadership. That's what they can produce.
Yeah, it has been indeed a historic moment for India. I do want to talk about the energy situation in India, Minister. How are you feeling about rising oil prices? Oil prices have gone up 16% from June lows of $72 per barrel. There is, of course, talk about how Saudi Arabia still wanted to keep the supply side of the equation tight by rolling over its voluntary cuts into October. How are you looking at that situation?
Look, if you ask me, how are you looking at it? Now, I think it's an open story that I would be happier with $72 a barrel. But then I'm acutely conscious of the fact that anybody who has that access to and has those natural resources. It's a sovereign right as to how they want to play with it. And but I choose to make assessments with due caution and with circumspection. Let me say why I say this. Yes, I think there are voluntary cutbacks which some countries who are part of OPEC Plus have announced. But equally, there are difficulties amongst some of the major economies. By major economies, I mean not just any economy. There are difficulties in a very large economy, which is the second largest in the world. And I don't think we are entirely aware of what the economic difficulties in other parts of the world are. And my submission to you is that sometimes high oil prices can become a self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of resulting in meeting of immediate and short-term needs, but in a world which is facing economic pressures. I'm not even using words like headwinds and so on. I'm not going into all that. There is a lot of inflationary reality down there following from the stimulus packages. If you have high oil prices on top of that, then that self-fulfilling prophecy means that at a particular point of time comes a tipping and then there's a fall in demand.
Yeah, high oil prices resolve high oil prices.
That's precisely the point. So what I think is going to happen is that the market has resolved, I think, in a very determined way. Because if there is a fall in demand and you are not even in a position to make your existing quotas work. As it is, there are many members in OPEC Plus who have quotas but are not able to fulfill.
They're underperforming on quotas.
Underperforming on quotas for a variety of reasons. Let's not go into that. There are some who can, but they are undertaking voluntary cuts to keep the amount of supply in the market short of what the requirement is in order to get higher prices.
Are you worried about the situation?
I never worry. I never worry.
I'll tell you why there's reason to worry. Because every $1 increase in oil prices increases India's oil import bill by $2 billion.
Let me explain to you.
And if Saudi Arabia is aiming for $90 to $100 per barrel on oil, then doesn't that have an impact on India's economy and India's inflation?
I love the way you calculate all the things I have to worry about. But let me turn the conversation around. I have one major advantage in the sense that I have a large appetite for that commodity. Out of it used to be 102 million barrels a day production, which came down to what, 97 or so. Out of that, 5 million barrels and more rising by the day is what I buy. I means India.
Yes,
okay.
5 million barrels.
5 million or even more, madam.
Yeah.
If I stop buying that 5 million barrels, see what the condition then will be. And we are also the land of Mahatma Gandhi. If we reduce our production, our consumption by 1 or 2 or 3%, they won't know where to sell the oil to. I mean, there are two large countries. One is China, one is India. So I'm never worried. What I am concerned about is that sometimes we approach these issues in a very narrow, partisan sort of a way. If the oil markets remain turbulent, okay, it's neither good for the producers nor good for the consumers, because then you will have these wide this thing. You could argue that one of the reasons we've had difficulties is because investment in traditional fossil fuels tapered off after a while, as a result of which people couldn't fulfill their quotas, other things went wrong from the producer's point of view. But I think throughout this period, in India, we never allowed any of the three components of that trilemma.
Right.
Availability, affordability, and sustainability to take a beating. So whether the producers produce X or Y or Z, we'll deal with the situation. We diversify. Now what happens?
I'll come to diversification, sir, but the end consumer has to pay. And so I wonder whether you will be able to pass on some of that relief to the end consumer by cutting excise duty. Is that something in the works?
Well, we've done it twice in the past. I'm not.
Is there more to come?
I'm not let's say, privileged to decide or to even speculate on what we will do, but I can give you the history of the last few years. When our oil prices went from $19.56 a barrel to $128 a barrel, what did India do? The Prime Minister stepped in and the central government decreased its excise duty on 2 occasions. Once in November 21 and the second time in May 2022.
Can we expect that in the next 6 months?
Again, that's the realm of speculation. And the BJP states brought down the VAT that they charge. All right. As a result of which, we have a very interesting situation that there are major differences between different states. In BJP states, for instance, I'll give you a comparison on July 23 prices. In one BJP state where there's a BJP government, the price was 98 rupees and 3 paisa a litre. And another one, West Bengal, it was 106, difference of 8 rupees per litre. In another state, Gandhinagar, which is Gujarat, and Jaipur, which is Rajasthan, one BJP, the other one, difference 11 rupees 85 paisa a litre. Now, you don't fill just 1 litre in your car, so if you're filling a full tank is different. But I'll give you something more. Differences between India and the rest of the world. What is the difference? I will look at increase in India between June 21 and June 23. I'm taking a two-year period. I'm taking the month of June as representative because statistics everywhere are not available. India, the increase was 2% only, 2.36%. In my neighborhood, Pakistan 50.83, Bangladesh 30.11, Sri Lanka nearly 80% increase in prices. Let me go to the developed industrialized world. US increase was 30.15%, Canada 24.17%. Now, surely the political maturity, the ability to navigate was on display. So if you ask me a question, would you be willing to do it again? I'm not in a position, I would not be willing to answer it, but I can say...
But we have elections coming up next year,
So what are the elections? We have elections coming up in India all the time. 5 years in a row we have election.
So between now and election time, would you?
Look, let me put it this way. There are 2 ways of dealing with a problem. We used to have a government in India. Since you are an international channel, I shall not name it, that government. When they were confronted with a difficulty, they decided to float something called oil bonds. So they floated oil bonds, what, 1,41,000 crores, how many $1 billion does that become? I can calculate, I don't know what the exchange rate then was. And many years later, these were floated between 2004 and 14. Many years later, we are paying back 3,50,000 crores. So look, democratically elected governments, and I choose my words very carefully, democratically elected governments are always, will have to be always, and need to be sensitive to the requirements of the consumer. And the bulk of the consumers in a country with developmental challenges like India are people who are, not in what you call affluence, people who live in Singapore or who live in Switzerland or who live in the United States by and large. And I think the government of Prime Minister Modi has understood that. They've taken the necessary policy decisions. By the way, the government doesn't do the importing. We have a large public sector and a large private sector. And they are reasonably good at their game. They buy from wherever they can at the cheapest price available.
And let's talk about that then. Let's talk about the importing of Russian oil, which I believe reports indicate is now 50%. At 50% meeting India's oil demand. I mean, 50% of India's oil demand is being met by Russian oil at a narrower discount. So earlier the discount, I believe, was $30 a barrel. Now it's
$30 a barrel. Tell me.
This is what oil analysts tell me. This is what I've heard from oil analysts.
Okay.
Earlier the discount was $30 a barrel on Russian crude. Now it's $15 a barrel. My question to you is India getting over-dependent on Russian oil?
India doesn't get over-dependent on anyone. There was a time when Russian, or rather imports from Russia, accounted for a total of 0.2% of our imports. You see, India is this
But today it's
mature
50%.
No, it's not 50%, can't be. I mean, if what you say is correct, that there's a 30% discount, which means the Russians are putting a ribbon around it and sending it to us free. That's what it means. So I don't take this serious. Yes, there have been discounts, but there have been discounts coming from all over. As I said, there was a point of time, I think, if I'm correct, the military action in Russia-Ukraine took place something February 2022.
That's right.
I think in the first few months after that, we started going from 0.2%, which is de minimis. It wouldn't show up on a figure. We started going up, 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 up. Then suddenly it came down. Then we started buying more from a country in the Middle East, I think Iraq.
Yeah.
So, madam, let me put it this way to you. If India buys 5 million barrels a day, that's a round figure. There are points of time when there are 4 or 5 suppliers, traditionally UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, maybe someone else. But we've diversified. We used to buy from 27 sources. Today we are buying from 39 sources.
So you're categorically denying that 2 million out of the 5 million is coming from Russia right now?
It can't come. It can't. It physically can't come.
Got it.
Even from the point of view of Saudi, you see, I'll tell you what, there is a price sensitivity in these things. First of all the suppliers in the Gulf region have a head-on advantage because of proximity and I'm talking about geographical proximity and the limited freight. One particular source there charges what is called an Asian premium, which is the differential between the price in Europe and here. I don't know how it's calculated. Now that makes it a little more expensive. There are others who don't charge that premium. They have an advantage. So our companies will float tenders and buy from wherever they can get the cheapest. Now there has to be a catch in this.
But is Russian crude that attractive right now? You're talking about
It is probably still important, but I've also seen reports. First of all, I don't get into how much discount it is and how that discount, who's offering it to whom. I know one thing, Indian buyers have become, by buyers I mean both the private sector and the public sector, they've become adept at playing this new market. So what they will do is they will all combine together and they will negotiate this thing. So last I heard was that the discounts, which used to be impressive earlier, were much less. And then, they was decided to shift their imports elsewhere. So I think what is happening is a very dynamic situation. Month on month, you'll say, oh, suddenly Russian things have dropped. Suddenly Iraq has gone up. Suddenly UAE has gone up. Somebody else has gone down. But I don't buy this thing that 50% is coming from one source or could come from one source. The others would be in difficulty in that case.
All right, so I want to talk about a very important issue, which is diversification of India's energy needs and energy sources. Before that, just one question on a possibility of disruption of supplies and deliveries of oil tankers coming to India via the Black Sea. Because what I'm given to understand is that the overall cost of production as well as transportation for shippers has gone up above the price cap of $60 per barrel set by the EU. And so that could turn out to be a challenge in terms of disruption of supplies to India. Do you see it as one?
I don't see any of these as difficulties. There will be international arrangements. People will fix price caps. They will do all these kinds of things. As a result, if sometimes something becomes unattractive, people will shift supplies to elsewhere. There is, and I make this submission to you with all seriousness, there's enough oil available in the world. What you should be really worrying about is whether the consumer will have the resources or the money to pay for it. That is, I think, the real problem. Because if many of these countries, in order, some are rich enough to undertake production, voluntary restraint agreements on themselves, but there are others who need to produce in order to maintain, and new suppliers are coming on the market.
Okay.
I mean, some of them are coming directly, some are coming through Western oil suppliers, and there are a number of suppliers waiting to come into the market. Now, somebody has to take a composite view, both political in terms of what are the kind of adjustments that are required. I'm not particularly worried about that.
So what role does the US play as India tries to diversify its energy sources?
We buy more and more from them. We have a very healthy economic relationship with them. They're our largest trading partner. When I was Joint Secretary on the Americas desk, I could never have imagined that in any 1 year we would be buying $20 billion of energy from the US and rising. But more than that, US is also a collaborator with us in many areas. Green hydrogen, But I think in between there is this whole biofuels thing, transition. There are two things. One, transition to a gas-based economy. Going from 6% to 15%, it will require $60 billion. We're doing it.
How much support are you getting for that?
We're getting, because this is private investment that comes into that.
Okay.
I mean, there are a lot of people who want to sell us gas, but you must have the infrastructure to be able to receive it at your port. And if it's coming as liquid, to gasify it. We have, I think, just now 7 such infrastructure facilities on our ports. We're taking it up to 11 from 7. But look at the otherwise the expansion taking place in India. Refining capacity. We have 252 million metric tons per annum today. We are taking it up to 400. And Prime Minister even used the word 450 in one place. So India is the place where energy, development, more production domestically, more refining, more economic activity around energy, biofuels. We've gone to from 1.4% biofuel mixing in 2014 to nearly 12% now.
And also transition to clean energy?
That is the transition. That is the transition. That's why I talked about trilemma.
No, but wind energy, solar energy.
Absolutely, absolutely. First of all, you will not get green hydrogen unless you can produce, solar effectively and cost effectively. And we've demonstrated. I think we brought the cost per unit of solar down from 25 cents to 3 cents per unit. Now, you have that, plus you have electrolyzers, and you've got green hydrogen.
Okay. So just 2 more questions before we wrap up. One is on the export levies that have been imposed on exports of jet fuel as well as diesel. Would we see more such measures for Indian refiners who have been benefiting because of higher oil prices? Their margins expand, of course.
I would put it differently. The kind of situation we faced in the last few years, more particularly the last 1 year, I think, where you had something unprecedented happening, that on account of the changed circumstance, some of them were making windfall profits, okay? Because that's a global situation turned out, and some were taking a beating. So what, India didn't do it, by the way, first. The world did it. When a windfall tax was imposed, it went all around, we were one of the last to do it. This is something that the finance ministry monitors, I think, on a fortnightly basis. And they adjust the export tax, because nobody wants a situation. Nobody means, as I said, nobody in the world, that you will be exporting all your stuff and there will be a sudden vacuum or a total shortfall here.
Sure.
So that's an adjustment mechanism put in place to meet an extraordinary circumstances. It's not a permanent feature of any country's arrangements.
Right. Finally, sir, a big theme globally is de-dollarization, which must have
reached
de-dollarization, which must have definitely reached your ears.
I have been around for 39 years as a diplomat.
I understand.
I served 6 years after that. I've been a minister for 6 years.
I understand.
There'll be all kinds of buzz that will come. There was something.
But de-dollarization in the oil market, the fact that rupee-ruble trade is happening in oil, the fact that Indian refiners are settling oil coming from Russia in yuan terms, how do you look at that? I mean, what can you say about that?
Do me a favor. Since you live in Singapore and you have access to all those intelligent people who do that, find out how much. I was so excited when I saw rupee arrangement. By the way, I would like to be able to transact everything in rupees. That's my personal. But how much?
I also read that Russians prefer the yuan to the rupee.
No, I don't know what the Russians prefer. There was one transaction somewhere which IOCL did and which nobody took notice of. What happened is that there was some problem somewhere else and the IOCL didn't do it. It's somebody, some bank in between who made some transfer. But that's a lot of, if I may be permitted to use the word, hogwash. That's all. So the main point is that now India has concluded after the visit of the Honorable Prime Minister to the UAE a few months ago, we had a rupee and there are arrangement. But the transactions which are taking place, how many percent is coming in rupees and how many? Look, this is going to be a long journey. So the world's leading economy, what, $26 trillion?
22, 23?
No,
US?
I would say probably higher, maybe, I don't know. And how
US, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
US.
Yeah.
How much China you would put at 16?
China is about 18. Yeah.
So 18 and 23? No, I think the difference is a little more. But anyway,
Okay.
let's go to that separately.
Yeah.
They will meet, let's say, Johannesburg, and BRICS will be expanded. Does that mean that an alternate global currency is coming to be? Come on. I mean, I've been in this game long enough. You know, we heard about, decoupling. We heard about a diarchy. Once I heard when there was one talk, US and China are going to come together. You must remember that.
Yeah.
But listen, international arrangements, trading arrangements, payment arrangements, these have been in place for a long time. If, as a result of some factors, a little more of the other taking place, that doesn't talk of what is the word?
De-dollarization.
De-dollarization. I don't know. I've heard of
So dollar is hard to replace, you think?
First of all, are you seriously talking about, where do the transactions take? Yes. In between, when I was a civil servant, the euro was born. And we said, the euro, this will happen, that will happen. I don't know. I wish all the currencies very well. I wish the Indian rupee should be the lead currency in the world. But I'm also a realist. If I run a $4 trillion economy and 50% of it is in the external sector, then I know that I only have, $2 trillion of international transactions. Imports of goods and services and exports and value of remittances. Where is the US? Where are the other countries, etc.? So this is, have I given you a long-winded, obfuscatory answer? I hope so.
You have, but I just want to get the last word on this. Do you think that the dollar's hegemony in the oil market...
I don't use the word hegemony.
Okay.
You
Dominance?
use the word. Well, a dollar's prominence and the dollar's current position, I don't know what kind of change it will be affected, but I don't see it, if you have a favorite currency in mind, do you have any?
I don't, sir. I'm
no,
just
I don't know where you
asking the
live. They have,
questions.
if somebody wants to put their currency, it's not so easy.
Okay. So dollar's prominence will remain, you think?
Yes, I think it will, yeah.